Introduction. On the Green Line. With its glamorous history, mix of European and Arab influences and liberal cosmopolitan culture, Beirut had once been known as the Paris of the Mideast. But those days were long past. There was no mistaking the street where I stood. We were in the center of a war zone. It was the fall of 1982. Israeli troops were poised all along the country's southern border, ready to go in and wipe out the Palestinians who were dug in along that same border and determined to repel the Israelis at any cost. It was a standoff ready to explode at the smallest spark. I had just spent an hour visiting Camille Shimon, the 82-year-old Christian former president of Lebanon, hoping to get his read on the situation. The conversation had been inconclusive. Shimon's home was located on the Christian side of the barren strip of scorched earth that divided Beirut into its two warring, irreconcilable halves, east and west, Muslim and Christian. The desolate strip of land had been dubbed, with an irony I'm sure nobody intended, the Green Line. I'd never seen anything less fertile, less evocative of life, less green than this parched place. We emerged and stood for a moment, blinking under the glare of the Mediterranean sun and chatting with our Israeli security guard when suddenly a shot rang out. I should have ducked, but instead I froze. This was only my second trip to the Mideast, and I hadn't yet acquired the war zone reflexes that would come in later years. Like a carpenter's calluses or coal miner's cough, a kind of hair-trigger vigilance that comes with the territory, part and parcel of the seasoned diplomat's trade. In Central Africa, you learn how to cope with mosquitoes. In Beirut, you learn how to duck bombs and bullets. But as a freshman congressman just learning the ropes, I was pretty green myself, and I was still staring dumbly at the rubble-strewn streets, looking vaguely for the source of the sound, when I was grabbed and yanked to the ground. A sharp ping ran out, tearing a small cloud of dust from the wall just inches from where my head had been. The young Israeli dragged me 10 or 15 feet to a bus, pitched me in and jerked the door closed. Palestinian snipers were closing in. With the sound of my heartbeat pumping in my ears, one thought flooded my racing brain. What on earth am I doing here? Once the danger passed, I stayed on and surveyed the area for a while, climbing through the rubble, hoping to catch a clear glimpse of the PLO forces on the other side of the Green Line, the Muslim side. At the time, I didn't realize what a vivid metaphor this effort was for the direction the rest of my life would take. Suddenly, I caught the movement out of the corner of my eye, and the next moment I was staring into the barrel of an Uzi. I had stumbled onto an Israeli lookout post hidden among the rubble, and a young Israeli soldier, having no way of knowing who or what I was about to blow my head off. Nobody was reading me any Miranda rights here. This was war. Kill or be killed. My reflexes were a little sharper this time, and fortunately I'd learned a bit of Hebrew since my first trip to the Mideast some months earlier. I knew just enough to shout out, "Bavakasha, ani ish Congress." Please, I am a congressman. The boy's finger froze on the trigger, and he slowly lowered his Uzi. In a few short hours, I had nearly been killed twice, and whether delivered by a bullet from the Christian side or the Muslim side of that deadly Green Line, my death would have been just as final. No matter which side of an armed conflict one supports, both sides are ultimately sponsors of the same end: destruction. This is not a book about Beirut. It is a book about a world rift by its own Green Line, split like a macrocosmic Lebanon into two warring, seemingly irreconcilable halves. More particularly, it's about the efforts of one man, clambering about the rubble and straddling that pervasive green line, to peer at the other side and to see what ground the two sides might possibly share. This was not the path I'd set out to follow 25 years ago as a conservative Republican congressman and evangelical Christian just entering the world of Washington politics. At the time, I believed that Islam was a religion of violence, that the Quran preached the destruction of all non-Muslims, and that the Quran and Islam were of the devil, as godless as the great evil of communism, whose defeat was then the defining purpose of American foreign policy. I believe that Islam and Christianity were contradictory at their core, that the Eastern Islamic and the Western Judeo-Christian cultures were irretrievably opposed to one another, and that the only possible solution to this conflict was the conversion of them so that they would become more like us. My worldview could not have been cleaner or simpler or more myopic. In the years that followed, I was led to question the truth of these axioms. In time, I learned that every one of them was utterly, categorically false. I learned that when we stop buying into our cultures, prejudices, assumptions, and prevailing habits of thought, and begin to investigate the texts of our different holy books in their original languages, conflicts between crucial terms and entire passages that have traditionally been viewed as irreconcilable begin to evaporate. I learned that the deadly misunderstanding dividing our world today need not do so tomorrow. What follows in these pages is not some new form of ecumenism or syncretism, where Christians, Muslims, or anyone else is expected to give up cherished and long-held beliefs or creeds. It is rather a chronicle of one person's search for a rich common ground that exists between these faiths and cultures. It has been a constant source of both astonishment and inspiration to find that this common ground is not some far-fetched ideal, but is textually sound and eminently practicable. In some extremely delicate and hostile political situations, I've seen it work miracles. Mark D. Siljander.